All right, so hello everyone. My name's Liz. I'm the program manager at Carolina Navigators at UNC Chapel Hill. And I'm here today with three of my students, Grace, Hia, and Emma. And they're going to teach you a little bit about some of the countries that they've studied abroad in or worked abroad in Ecuador, Bangladesh, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. And so they're going to give you some background information on those countries, and they're also going to talk about some social movements that have taken place in those countries, which might connect some with what you're studying in civics and economics. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my students.
Hi everyone, I'm Emma. I'm a freshman at Carolina and I'm studying global studies and Asian studies. I took a gap year last year and lived in Bosnia and Herzegovina, so that's the country I'll be talking about today.
So we wanted to kind of start off the activity by asking you all, what's a social movement? So what comes to mind when you think of that? And you can use the chat or you can unmute yourselves or however you want to answer. So yeah, you all had kind of the right idea. A group of diffusely organized people or organizations striving towards a common goal relating to human society or social change. So both the struggle for trans rights and Black Lives Matter are both good examples of social movements.
So Bosnia and Herzegovina is located in Europe, as the map on the right, yes, that is right, shows. And in Bosnia, so the maps, there's the flag on the upper left, and then it's a very old like country, except it seems newer, and I'll get into that a little while later. But the flag comes from the Bosnian crest, from the medieval kingdom, and I have that. Sorry, I have that kind of in the center. And in Bosnia, religion is very strongly tied to ethnicity, and it's very important for what I'll be talking about in a bit. And so Bosnia, Muslims, Croats are Catholics, and Serbs are Serbian Orthodox Christians. Um, and while there's been a lot of division between these groups, especially in recent years, there's also a lot of unity. And the three pictures I have on the bottom are of a mosque, a cathedral, and then a Serbian cathedral. And those are actually all on the same street in Sarajevo. So when I was studying abroad, I could start at the mosque and I could just walk down that street and I would pass each of these churches. So that was really, really cool to see. So in Bosnia and Herzegovina, I'm going to talk about mainly two kind of protests, protests for independence or like movements for independence, and then protests and movements against the political instability that is in Bosnia. And then I'm also going to end with talking about the current diaspora. So kind of before I start talking about the current movements that are going on, I need to explain a bit about Bosnian history. It's kind of recent history. It happened in like the last 30 years. Yes. So Bosnia used to be a part of what was called Yugoslavia, which is in Eastern Europe. And throughout the 19th century, it was a formation of 6 republics that came together and were controlled by one, which was mainly, it was Serbia that basically controlled the others, and it was controlled by President Tito. And so when he died in 1980, it kind of just like fell apart because he didn't really leave someone to take over after him. He didn't like train anybody. And so there was a bunch of political fighting. And then all the republics started to drift away, starting with Slovenia, then Croatia, and then Bosnia and Herzegovina had the 1992 independence vote, and the referendum passed by a very, very large majority. But there was the Bosnian Serbs within Bosnia disagreed with this. They did not want to be separate from Serbia because they think of it as their homeland, and I'll get more into that in a bit. And so this resulted in the Bosnian War that lasted from 1992 to 1995. And it was a horrible war. and it resulted in the siege of Sarajevo, which Sarajevo is the capital city. It's where I live. And this siege lasted about 4 years. It actually went longer than the war because the troops did not want to leave the city, the troops that were sieging it. So the war was between the Bosniaks, the Croats, and the Serbs. And so on the map that I have in the corner, the circled part is kind of the area where the Croats were. And as you can see, that's nearest to Croatia because Croats think of Croatia as their homeland. And then the Serb majority areas were nearest to Serbia. And again, Serbs think of Serbia as their homeland. And then Bosniaks were kind of just in the middle. And they wanted to have Bosnia and they wanted to be free because when they were a part of Yugoslavia, Bosniaks and Croats both were seen as second citizens compared to Serbs. And so they wanted to have their own country so they didn't have to deal with that anymore, really. And again, it resulted in a lot of tragedy, including the Srebrenica genocide, where 8,000 people were murdered within 11 days. And it's the worst kind of genocide and worst mass killing that occurred since the Holocaust in Europe. And then the war finally ended in November 1995 with the signing of the Dayton Accords, which, while ending the war, didn't do a whole lot for political stability, but at least the killing stopped. But I'll get into that on the next slide. So the Dayton Accords separated Bosnia and Herzegovina into two political entities, one of which being the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which on the upper left map, those are the municipalities, which are like their counties that are in blue. And then you have Republika Srpska, and that is in red. That little yellow one is this really weird district called the Brčko district. That would take a really long time to get into, so I'm not going to. But it's kind of like Serbs, Bosniaks, and Croats live together, and they work together, and it works out really well. I don't know why it doesn't work anywhere else, though. And also what which makes the country very politically unstable, is that they have 3 presidents. So within their term, so 3 presidents are all elected at one time within elections, and they rotate every, I believe, 6 months within their terms. And I think they each are president twice. So we have trouble getting stuff done with 1 president. Imagine having 3 presidents. And so Republika Srpska and the Serb president, and the 3 presidents are based off of Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs. So there's a president for each ethnic majority, which also means that minorities within Bosnia, such as immigrants or Jews, they are often not politically represented. So Republika Srpska is always like, there's always been a movement for independence. I mean, the whole war was about them wanting to be independent and to go be with Serbia. And they did not really want to sign the treaty. It was this whole thing. The treaty was very hard to get signed. And so they still continue this desire for independence. And you can see that when each political entity celebrates Independence Day. So the Federation celebrates it on March 2nd. Well, and that was when the political or the vote for independence happened. So they think that of that as it. But then Republika Srpska celebrates on January 9th. And January 9th, they hold a lot of parades, as you can see with military, Republika Srpska military. This last parade, I believe in 2020, they had a Russian kind of like gang be a part of the parade. And it's kind of just a way to be like, we don't want to be a part of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And Republika Srpska actually also has its own flag, which is very similar to the Serbian flag, if you know what that looks like. And that's it on the bottom right. And I have a quote from one of the leaders, a very, very large leader within Republika Srpska. He was president of Republika Srpska for, I think 8 years, and right now he is the Serb president of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And his quote, and I believe this was said in 2019, but also in 2017, it's very recent, and he said that Serbs today have two countries, Serbia and Republika Srpska. And this is Milorad Dodik, and his picture is there in the bottom center. And he is always, I feel like it's an annual thing where he's like, Republika Srpska is going to become independent and we're going to leave Bosnia. Hasn't happened yet, but Bosnian Serbs are always having this movement for independence, holding parades, and yeah, just generally not wanting to be a part of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Next slide, please. Yeah, and so due to this political instability within Bosnia that comes from Republika Srpska not really wanting to be a part of it, and also almost every politician is corrupt, and so they won't really do anything if it helps the people, but it doesn't help themselves. And so this resulted in 2013 in the JMBG protest. And so the JMBG stands for, and this is the translation, the Unique Master Citizen Number. Yes, I see your question. It is. I was going to mention that. Think of it as like social security numbers. So a law about JMBGs were deemed unconstitutional by the Constitutional Court of Bosnia due to lack of the naming of municipalities within Republika Srpska. So basically, the JMBG has each number represents like a different thing. So like the month you were born, the date you were born, and then the region you were born, and I think a couple other things as well, probably which ethnicity you are. And so some of the municipalities in Republika Srpska weren't represented within the JMBG. And so the Constitutional Court said it was unconstitutional, and they gave the Bosnian parliament 6 months to amend the bill. And so they said, okay, amend it within this amount of time, and like, you know, it'll be fine. You have 6 months, which seems like it is plenty of time for something to get passed, right? They amended it, and the bill was killed in January 2013. So children born after February 2013 did not receive a JMBG, which means they could not get passports and they couldn't get like medical documents, I think. And so this resulted in Berina Hamidovic, who was a child born after February 2013 who did not receive her JMBG, and she needed to go to Serbia to get a medical surgery done so she could live. But since she didn't have her JMBG, she couldn't receive her passport, and so she died. And so the protests erupted on June 5th, 2013, and they demanded for the bill to be amended by June 30th. It wasn't. Protests continued July 1st, and actually, I believe protests eventually faded off, but I believe it was never resolved. I actually couldn't find out any info about that, and when I asked my friends in Bosnia, they said it was never resolved. So yeah, next slide, please. There was more political instability in 2014 with the 2014 protests, and these began in the city of Tuzla on February 4th, 2014. These are also known as the February protests. And so companies were privatized and hundreds of jobs were lost within Tuzla, because Tuzla is a very big factory city, factory city. And so a lot of people there are factory workers. And so when these companies would become privatized, they would decide that they weren't really worth it, and they would just kind of not, like, they would sell the company, and yeah, they would just fire people. And so Bosnia already has a very, very high unemployment rate due to the bad economy that is currently in the country. And so it's 27% to 47% unemployment. And I believe that is still very similar to what it is today. And so these protests began to spread to other cities, and they spread very, very quickly within like a day or two. And they were like very like rough protests. You can see there were police in that middle picture. Just people were flooding the streets. People would, I know there was a couple of cars that were put on fire. Fires were started at least in Sarajevo, I know. But by February 8th, protests calmed down, and they were completely gone by April, and nothing changed. There was no political change or anything. So because of people's kind of annoyance with the government, and they're like, well, we keep asking for you to change and you're not really changing, people are now leaving. And this is resulting in the Bosnian diaspora. And so if you don't know, a diaspora is a dispersion of any people from their original homeland. And it was originally given to Jewish people who were living outside of Israel. The name is now spread to a lot of other different peoples and ethnicities. And so the Bosnian diaspora is a lot of young people leaving Bosnia and going to Germany, Austria, France, or other countries with economic opportunities and political stability. So personally, I actually know like a ton of people within the Bosnian diaspora. While I was living there, my host sister lived in Germany with her family. A lot of my friends, their siblings live in Germany or Austria. And I actually had a friend who, while I was living there, he moved to Austria for a job, and he's hoping to never go back to Bosnia, which I think is really sad because Bosnia is a beautiful country and it has such beautiful culture. So it's really sad to see it becoming how it is just due to politically people not being able to get along. And it's all about politics and corruption and leaders not really wanting to give up what they're having, like the rights that they're giving themselves, and the money that they're giving themselves. So it's really hard to see it happening, but it is happening. All right, so the next question is, what is the primary way people are divided in Bosnia and Herzegovina? And the options are A, religion, B, where they're from, C, skin color, or D, political affiliation. And yes, it is A, religion. I see political affiliation that it's separated from religion to ethnicity to political affiliation, but political affiliation doesn't ethnicity, political affiliation reflects the ethnicity, but ethnicity doesn't reflect the political affiliation. If that makes sense. And the next question, which political entity wants to be a separate state? So we have A, Labor Party, B, Republika Srpska, C, Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and D, our party. And yes, it is B, Republika Srpska. The Federation they separated from Yugoslavia, but now it is Republika Srpska that wants to be separate from the Federation.